The Fire's Dark Secret. Chapter 1: A Call in the Night. My name is John Blake. I'm not the kind of person who gets easily rattled, but the events I'm about to share with you shook me to my core. I used to be a journalist, chasing stories that could make headlines, stories that could change lives. But this is different. It changed my life, and not in the way I expected. It all started on a cold winter night. I had left the world of journalism behind a few years ago, trying to escape the relentless deadlines and sleepless nights. But once you've been in the game as long as I had, you can't escape it. It follows you. I still had my connections, and every now and then, an old colleague would send me a tip, hoping I'd take the bait. That night, my phone rang just past midnight. It was Tom, an old friend from the force. "John, you need to get down here. I'm at a house on Redwood Avenue. There's been a death, a whole family, but there's something off. You'll want to see this," Tom said, his voice tense. I hadn't been to a crime scene in years, but something in his voice made me get out of bed and grab my coat. I didn't ask too many questions, but I knew this was more than just an ordinary call. I drove through the empty streets of the small town, the cold biting at my skin even inside the car. The town had always been quiet, the kind of place where nothing much happened. But that night, it was as if the air itself was holding its breath. When I pulled up to the house, the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles cast eerie shadows against the trees. The house was an old, two-story Victorian, its once beautiful exterior now faded and worn. I parked and walked toward the gathering of police officers and paramedics standing by the front door. Tom met me at the entrance, his face grim. "It looks like carbon monoxide poisoning," he said, leading me inside. "The whole family, mother, father, and 2 kids. But there's something else." I followed him through the narrow hallway, past the living room where the paramedics had covered the bodies with white sheets. The air inside was heavy, stale, and I could feel the weight of death clinging to every surface. The fireplace in the corner crackled with the last remnants of a dying fire. That's when Tom stopped and pointed toward the hearth. At first, we thought it was just a regular fire, maybe to keep the house warm, Tom said, his voice low. But when one of the firefighters started clearing the ashes, they found this. He motioned for me to step closer. I crouched down, staring into the fireplace. My eyes widened as I saw what lay buried in the ash: small, charred bones, the unmistakable remains of a human skeleton. Chapter 2: The Bones in the Hearth. I felt a chill crawl down my spine as I stared at the bones. They were blackened, almost hidden among the charred wood and ash, but there was no mistaking it, they were human. I looked up at Tom, searching for some kind of explanation. Who do they belong to? I asked, though I already feared the answer. We don't know yet, Tom replied, running a hand through his hair. We've accounted for the family. The parents and both children were found in their beds. But these bones, there's no way they belong to any of them. They're too small. I knelt down closer to the fireplace, trying to get a better look. The bones were fragile, some of them barely more than fragments, but they were unmistakably from a human body, more specifically, the bones of a child. Could there have been a third child? I asked, standing up and turning to Tom. Tom shook his head. The neighbors only ever mention the two kids. We're trying to figure out who these bones belong to, but we won't know until the coroner gets a proper analysis. It didn't make sense. A family had died from what appeared to be carbon monoxide poisoning, but why were there human remains in the fireplace? And who did they belong to? Chapter 3: The Family. I started digging into the history of the family. The Thompsons, as they were known, were a quiet, seemingly happy family. Mark and Lisa Thompson had moved into the house 5 years ago with their two children, Sophie and Noel. Mark worked at a local accounting firm, and Lisa ran a small bakery from their home. They were well liked by their neighbors, though they kept mostly to themselves. There was nothing in their past that suggested anything out of the ordinary. No criminal records, no signs of trouble. Just a normal, small-town family. But then there were the bones. The discovery gnawed at me. I couldn't get them out of my mind. If the Thompsons were as ordinary as they seemed, how did a child's bones end up in their fireplace? And why hadn't anyone noticed? Chapter 4: A Dark Past. I spent the next few days going through old records, trying to uncover anything that might explain what had happened. That's when I came across something strange. The house on Redwood Avenue had a history, a dark one. Years ago, long before the Thompsons had moved in, another family had lived there. The Millers. They had a young daughter named Emily, who had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. The case had never been solved, and the family had eventually moved away, leaving the house abandoned for years. Could the bones in the fireplace belong to Emily Miller? I reached out to one of the detectives who had worked on Emily's case. He was retired now, living in a small town a few hours away, but he remembered the case vividly. It was one of those cases that just sticks with you, he told me over the phone. We searched that house from top to bottom, but we never found a trace of Emily. It was like she just vanished. I told him about the bones in the fireplace, and there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Do you think they could be hers? I asked. I don't know, he replied. But if they are, it means someone's been hiding a terrible secret for a very long time. Chapter 5: Secrets and Lies. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than I was seeing. The Thompsons had no connection to the Millers as far as I could tell, but the fact that both families had lived in the same house couldn't be a coincidence. I went back to the house on Redwood Avenue, determined to find anything that could shed light on what had happened. The house was still sealed off, but Tom had given me permission to look around. As I walked through the empty rooms, I felt a growing sense of unease. The house was cold, lifeless, as if the very walls were holding on to the secrets of its past. I found myself drawn back to the fireplace, the place where the bones had been found. I knelt down, running my fingers along the brick. Something didn't feel right. I pushed on one of the bricks, and to my surprise, it moved. I pried it loose, revealing a small compartment hidden behind the wall. Inside was a journal. It was old, the pages yellowed with age, but it was still legible. I opened it, my hands trembling as I began to read. Chapter 6: The Journal. The journal belonged to Emily's mother, Margaret Miller. As I read through the pages, I began to piece together the dark history of the house. The Millers had been hiding a secret that had haunted them for years. According to the journal, Emily hadn't gone missing. She had died, accidentally, in the fireplace. Margaret wrote about how she and her husband had panicked, not knowing what to do. In their grief and fear, they had hidden Emily's body, burying her remains in the hearth, hoping that no one would ever find out. The weight of the revelation hit me hard. The bones in the fireplace belonged to Emily Miller. She hadn't been murdered. Her death had been a tragic accident, covered up by her parents out of fear and shame. Chapter 7: The Final Truth. With the journal in hand, I went to the authorities. The case was reopened, and the bones were confirmed to be Emily's. The Thompsons had unknowingly moved into a house haunted by the tragedy of its past, and in the end, they too had become victims, though not of the same crime. The coroner's report confirmed that the Thompsons had indeed died of carbon monoxide poisoning, a result of a faulty furnace. It was a tragic accident, but the discovery of Emily's bones in the fireplace had brought a long-buried secret to light. As I stood outside the house on Redwood Avenue for the last time, I couldn't help but wonder how many other houses held dark secrets of their own. Sometimes, the past has a way of coming back to haunt us, whether we're ready for it or not. Chapter 8: Moving On. The town moved on, as towns always do. The house on Redwood Avenue was eventually sold, and a new family moved in, unaware of its dark history. I left town not long after, and able to shake the feeling that there were more stories like this out there, waiting to be uncovered. But for now, I had enough. I had seen enough. Some stories, I realized, are better left untold. The end.